Hey, welcome to the study guide for this Sunday's message from James chapter 5, verse 7 through 12. In this passage, we have a conclusion to two of the passages that came right before it. Actually, the past 2 weeks, we've talked about those who were arrogant and planned their future without thinking of God, and then those who were arrogant and trusted in their riches and wealth. And both of these actions of arrogance lead to oftentimes an oppression of those who may not have the same prestige or power or wealth as you. And so what we saw last week was that those who were rich were oppressing those who didn't have that same kind of power. Now, coming out of that then, James talks about what we do if we are the ones who are being oppressed. And by the way, as we've talked about in previous series, we know that in the last days, Christians are going to be oppressed. We have seen this throughout history. We have seen how Satan has attacked. We've seen the persecutions of the church, certainly the persecutions of Jewish people. And as we see at the end, God will be drawing many of the Jewish people to him and they'll come to faith. And so we have to be prepared for those types of persecutions, not just about the end of times, but day to day. How do you handle that? How do you handle it whenever there's that kind of stress? And so James talks about that. As we get into this, we recognize that we're coming up on Holy Week. And we want to just pause and right now think about this. How did Jesus respond in the face of his accusers? How did Jesus respond in the face of his accusers? And let me ask you a question. How do you think you could respond? So obviously Jesus, the Bible says he could have called a legion of angels to destroy the world to set him free. And he didn't do that. I don't know about you, but I probably would have done that. And I don't know what your answer is to that previous question. But think about how we often respond to difficult times and challenges and things that attack us. We tend to lash back out. James is encouraging us in this passage to respond with patience. Let's read this passage together. James chapter 5, we begin in verse 7 and we go to verse 12. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. You too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance. You have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by the heavens or the earth or by anything else. All you need to say is simple, yes or no. Otherwise, you will be condemned. Well, here we have this challenge for those who feel like they're being oppressed, for those difficult times. And by the way, I see this today. And I see people who are Christians, they're lashing out in anger. Their social media posts are angry. They're just seething even at home because they feel like somehow they have control over this. You really don't. All you're supposed to have control over, and by the way, it's a fruit of the Spirit, is yourself, self-control. And so that's what James is saying here. Take control of yourself. Know this, that you've got to be patient because God's going to work these things together. And so, as we've thought about this passage, let's just pause and ask ourselves another question. Previous verses told us about how the rich and powerful oppressed others. Now James is speaking to those who feel oppressed in verses 7 and 8. Describe how a farmer's patience, as mentioned in James, would look if it applied to your life. How does the farmer have to be patient? Why does he experience patience? Why does he practice patience? And what is the end of his patience? Another thing that James warns us about is in challenging times, rather than bond together and form a circle where we protect one another, typically we will turn on each other. You see, stress brings about strife. And so in the church, we've seen this. Times of stress and times of distress bring about internal problems. And so James says, don't do that. And so let me ask you another question. How do challenging times often cause God's people to turn on each other? Have you seen it? And how can we avoid this? When I was a student in high school, I had a geometry teacher. He was a great teacher. And we never had tests, we never had quizzes. We had what he called opportunities for advancement. We started out at zero. Our grades were zero. We started out absolutely failing. But every opportunity for advancement was an opportunity to gain points so that our grades could be higher. When's the last time you saw the challenges of your life, the stresses that come from outside, the oppression, the attacks from the enemy as an opportunity for advancement? God's allowing you to go through this. He wants it, as in Job's illustration that we had earlier, to bring him glory. Satan is defeated when we stay faithful through these times. And so let me ask you a question. Can you think of challenging times as opportunities for advancement? Can you embrace those challenges? And if you were to embrace those challenges, if you were to see them as opportunities as advancement, then what would that look like? How would you do it? Finally, in this passage, James kind of takes a turn, but there must be something on his mind that just comes to the front of his thought pattern. He writes it down, and it seems strange, but yet it's appropriate. He says this in verse 12, "Above all, my brothers and sisters, do not swear, not by heaven or by earth or by anything else. All you need to say is a simple yes or no, otherwise you will be condemned." Eventually, or evidently, in these stressful times, in these times of oppression, there's a temptation to not be people of your word. Or perhaps there's a temptation to lash out with your words and curse. And so here, James says, let your yes be your yes. You don't need to make rash promises. Now, the Bible doesn't say that we should never make oaths or promises, but the Bible says that we shouldn't be those who have to make promises. That when we say our yes is yes and our no is no, that ought to be a mark of integrity in our lives. Let me ask you a question. In these days, is your life marked with integrity? Are you a man or woman of your word? Are you a person who controls your tongue when stressed? I make no mistake, challenging times will come. Life is going to be hard, and the more that we face the ends of time, the more the devil's going to show his teeth. But we also know this: God is faithful. So as we wait for those fall rains to come and the harvest to come, we exercise the patience of that farmer. I hope that you'll exercise that kind of patience, that you'll have self-control, that you'll control how you speak, that you will stay true to one another, not turn yourselves against one another, and that we will glorify God in our patience, trusting that he's going to bring all things together for the good to those who love him and are called according to his purpose. God bless you. Thanks for watching this week.